Hello, this is Jasper here, and I'm like to show you how the ignition module for Factry works. So before me here you can see we have an empty factory setup. We have no measurements, we have no collectors, so nothing is in here. And on the other hand, you have an ignition with, let's say, a very small demo project on it with some tags. Let me get our designer. So we have a few views, we have some tags in here, but not too extreme, not too much. You can see here the tags, they are moving. So tags and ignition are basically the measurements in Factry. So depends on what term you're most familiar with. And so we have a tree structure in ignition with tags coming in here, and then in Factry we have nothing yet. So we're gonna connect ignition to Factry and start historizing our tags in Factry, and then we're gonna see a very basic demo on how to see the values from Factry back in ignition. But yeah, of course there are more ways than to build dashboards in ignition. So first thing what we need to do is we need to download the module for the Factry module. So you can find out if you would type in GitHub ignition Factry module, you would find the open source module that we have from Factry Labs, Factry Historian Ignition module. You go to releases, and here you go to the latest one, and here you have the .model file, and this is the one we will use. So then you have to go to ignition gateway, so that's localhost 8088 because I'm running this in Docker locally. Go to modules, install or upgrade a module, to choose a file. I have it here installed. Downloaded, and then we install the module, accept the certificates and accept the license agreement, and then the module is installed. You'll see here a square, and that says you need to restart the gateway. In ignition you need to restart if you have a new module or an update of a module, and then if you refresh, you'll see that the gateway status will become online again in a few moments. Yeah, so we're online again. Now go check that the module is definitely here. So if you would type in Factry, you'll see its status is active, license is free, and this is the version I'm on. Next thing you need to do in ignition is we need to go to services, historians, and then we need to create a historian. So we have all these options that are default in ignition, but now we also have a Factry historian in this list. So we can pick that, we can call it whatever we want, and the setup is very easy. We need to say use TLS but skip TLS verification because it's local. If you work with an official certificate grantor, you can uncheck this. And then we need a token. And this is a collector's token that we need from Factry. So in Factry, if you're already familiar, we might have an ignition collector and default database selected, and then we have our ignition collector. We generate a token, copy it to the clipboard, and then in ignition we can just paste it. And this token, it says the endpoint and all that kind of data. it says in there. And then we have our factory historian. It says that it is running, but normally I have no tags configured yet to come in here. Oh, except for these two apparently. But yeah, we're already seeing that something has been created. So default AA MBB, and it does exist here. So if we go to default, these two, let me show you. These were already configured on Factry. So I'll do the same for another tag, one that's in our tree structure. So we have here a factory that's making oats, and we go to the heater, and then let's say we pick the temperature from the heater, and let's rename this to factory. And this is the history settings in Ignition. It's pretty cool what you can do with it. Like you could say that the deadband style, like you could add the deadband, like when should it change, and what how many does the value need to change before you want to store it? Do you want to change it periodically or on change or with a group? You can set in the deadband. You can say this is the minimum time between samples and this is the maximum time between samples. So if a value never changes, you might want to store it once an hour or once a day to solve some of your data analytics problems. So these are options that you have in Ignition, and that you can play around with. So yeah, I've changed it and the value is changing. So we should see it coming into Factry, and yes, we do see a measurement coming in here. So that's good. Now I have something prepared to change all my values. So all factory outs, I replace them with factory, replace all my tags, replace succeeded. And now all these tags will be starting to push in factory, and we can already see them coming in here. And we can click on them and we can see the values. We can see a preview in Factry as well. So that's pretty neat. And then we have our full system set up to let Factry be the historian of our SCADA system or our Ignition system. And then the next step is visualizing it in Ignition. If you're a bit familiar with Ignition, it's pretty easy. You can just use the historian functions that are in Ignition. So I will use the simplest version of dashboarding. It's the power chart. It's not a fancy chart, but it's the one you can manipulate the least. So it's closest to Ignition's default behavior. And so we can see here it has a browser, and we can see factory measurements. You also see assets, and that means we could also see things in Factry that are not stored by Ignition. So if Factry has more measurements or more assets and a structure, we could also query it here. But now we only have our Ignition data here, and we can see our whole structure. We can query it, and we can find our heater again, and we can select it and select the value and add it, and we'll see here the values of the last 5 minutes. So yeah, so apparently it stopped changing, but yeah, you'll see here the data is coming in. Just check why it is not changing anymore. Okay, there it is. Yeah, and then you can see the data changing here live. So this data is coming from Factry, and it's using like Ignition's default power chart here. So and the cool thing is, because we use the new API from Ignition, the aggregation is done in Factry. So that also means if this is now data from 5 minutes, but if you would show data from 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, the speed would be the same. So, and that's, I think, a very big plus of using the new Ignition API. And that makes this module quite cool, I would say.